Once again, hello to all of you. Thank you for joining us in this course, either through the live session itself or by means of a recording. I am very excited to be facilitating this course. And as I've mentioned last time, partly because this is such an exciting topic to look into, but also in my experience, whenever I run something associated with the four immeasurables, whether that's a loving kindness retreat or a short webinar or an elaborate session or a course like this, whenever something like that is being done, I see people reporting on the practical benefit that they received and the actual changes in their emotions and their environment, in the way they feel about the world, and in the level of happiness that they experience. And I think that's, of course, the greatest immediate reward to a facilitator of a course like that, and to the organization hosting it, in this case, the Contemplative Consciousness Network. So we're collectively very much hoping that you will also find some benefit in what we have to offer in this course. And hopefully the contemplations last week, the exercises, the journaling, the meditations already brought some greater clarity and a greater level of well-being. With that, we will continue today, doing more meditations, more contemplations, exploring more content and considering some concepts that might be new for some people and very deeply familiar to others. So we'll see how it goes. And we have our 2-hour session ahead of us. And most of it will once again be done by relying on these slides that I like to use just for clarity. The reason behind using the slides is not to hide you from each other. You can still turn on the side-by-side view. You can still use the gallery view on one side of your screen. If you're using the computer version of Zoom, you're perfectly welcome to do that. You can also hide me in the little corner or have me side by side with the slides. These are just some of the options that the computer version of Zoom offers. But the idea is that, in my experience, when people look at these slides and they see the definitions, the classifications, and so forth, that just adds some greater clarity. That's the only reason we're using these. It's not because I think highly of my abilities as a graphic designer. So I apologize in advance to all of you, because of course there will be inevitably some misprints on these slides, as we have established last time. And also some people would rather look at the gallery view at all times. However, that would mean I would have to either provide notes and something like that, and you would have to look at those notes and so forth. So slides is a bit easier with that. Or alternatively, I'll have to be typing a lot in the chat and constantly dropping definitions there and so forth, which is, once again, in my experience, slightly less useful and beneficial in terms of the learning experience. So my apologies for that. Beyond that, it will be business as usual, in that we will begin with the preliminary meditation. And for that, I would invite you to once again find a comfortable stationary position and to perceive the process of looking for that comfortably stationary position as an act of kindness to ourselves already. So our body will spend about 15 minutes in meditation. That's a lot of time to be still. And so we might want to find a position that would be both comfortable and beneficial for practice. And that would ideally mean having our spine straight, whether we are in the supine position on our back in the so-called Shavasana posture, or sitting upright, having our spine elongated, if that's available to us, making sure all the other parts of the body are comfortably positioned around the spine as the central axis of our body. That is something that we might take a minute or two to do. So let's explore the position, the posture. Let's establish a certain level of comfort there, along, of course, with vigilance, making sure our body is not falling asleep, because that's not the reason for practicing this. We're practicing as to bring in greater clarity and awareness. But beyond that, once our body has found that optimal meditation position, the next step would be allowing our awareness to descend into the depths of the body and to notice the stability in the parts of the body that are currently in touch with the ground. Noticing the sensations of firmness, stillness, reliability. Breathing naturally, allowing our attention to live the body with each out breath or through our feet and the backside of our legs, or through our nostrils, or through our fingertips. Whichever one of these images feels most appropriate in this case. But generally, releasing all types of tension, relaxing into stillness, and then resting in the stillness as we enjoy it. To deepen this experience of resting in the natural state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance for our body, or relaxation, stability, and clarity for our mind, we'll do a very abbreviated body scan where we notice the sensations in the specific body parts, and then we, if that's available to us, release the tension there, seeing if that can be done, and being curious and open. And so, in that regard, becoming aware of our feet and toes, releasing tension from our hands and fingers, spending some time around the area of our pelvic floor, checking on the sensations there. Then our shoulders. And finally, the face. From the face, returning to the body in general, with all of its sensations, and especially the sensations that accompany the process of breathing in and out, and the natural rhythm chosen or dictated by the body itself. And with our body resting like that, allowing our mind to explore the 4 questions of the Vision Quest practice. 4 questions that revolve around the concept of genuine, long-lasting well-being. Hedonic and eudaimonic, both. And the first question that we explore by allowing a certain vision or a certain general understanding to arise is the question of, how do I envision my own genuine flourishing? A true experience of well-being and happiness that I would like to arrive at. What is my vision of genuine flourishing for me as a person? We present that question to our mind with all of its levels, including the most profound ones, and then we patiently wait as this general understanding or general vision unfolds. And once we have some idea of that true flourishing, we respond to it with the aspiration of loving kindness for ourselves, simply wishing, may it be so. May it be so. May I find this true flourishing. Breathing naturally in a relaxed manner, and yet, perhaps, if we want to, breathing life into this vision and making it more and more real for ourselves with each exhalation. And then from that, progressing to the second question, the question of, what types of support and resources do I need from the world around me and from other beings in order to realize this genuine well-being? What types of support do I need? Once again, the answer is some general understanding, a vision, an overall idea. And we respond to that with the same aspiration of loving kindness, wishing, may it be so. May I receive all the types of support that I might need in this journey, in this quest. And then still breathing naturally, we can imagine inviting all these types of support and accepting them with each inhalation. And then for a moment at O2, maybe even feeling that we have received all the types of resources and support that we might need, and simply seeing how that would feel. And then from there, progressing to the third question. What habits do I need to change? How do I as a person need to transform in order to arrive at that genuine state of flourishing, that genuine well-being? What do I need to let go of? What do I need to strengthen? What do I need to establish in myself? And once again, responding with, may it be so. I wish, coming from our loving kindness for ourselves, coming from our tenderness for ourselves, may it be so. May it be so. May I be transformed in these ways through gradual incremental changes. And that with that wish, breathing naturally, we can imagine that with each cycle of breathing, we are gradually and slowly transformed so that our true potential is revealed, is realized, is uncovered. And finally, since we're exploring the way to uncover our true potential, asking ourselves, what is the gift that I would like to share with the world as a part of that genuine flourishing? And then with whatever comes to mind, breathing naturally and imagining that we are sharing that gift with the world. We are extending this type of giving, this type of generosity to all beings so that their lives are transformed and so that all beings themselves come closer to true, genuine well-being. And then we release that vision, all the aspirations, all the general or specific ideas, everything that is, in this regard, a play of the creative aspect of our mind, aspirational by nature. And for a few moments, we instead rest in the aspect of simplicity. Simply aware, simply present, but not allowing our mind to fuse with any of the stories, mental events, images, thoughts, and so forth. Just resting right where it is, in its own place. And then at the end of this meditation, to establish a motivation for the session itself, we might think of dedicating every moment of this session, whether attended live or used by means of a recording, dedicating every moment of this session to this genuine well-being for ourselves and others. May everything we do in the session contribute to that goal and be deeply meaningful, supporting happiness and freedom for all beings. With that, we bring our awareness back to the body, noticing its sensations, its stability, its posture. And then we slowly conclude the practice and return to our shared online space, but also to our actual physical space, where we once again find our body, we stretch, we do a little victory dance if that feels right, and then we turn to the actual material for the session. Thank you. Thank you for joining me in this meditation. It is hopefully always meaningful to do this practice, at least it is for me. And it is always a practice that would bring, in a way, new answers and new aspirations, not perhaps radically new from one day to another, but new nuance here or there, new understanding of what our general current idea of happiness might represent or might entail, and so forth. And then with that, slowly, of course, also cultivating this quality of kindness for ourselves where we are truly able to wish genuine well-being and all that is necessary for that genuine well-being to ourselves and then eventually to others. So in a way, we're already doing the practice of loving kindness, even though we will start looking at the definition of loving kindness, the logic of loving kindness, and so forth in our next session. For now, for this specific class, we need to do some further foundational work to lay the foundation for the actual practices, so the 4 immeasurables. And that's what we're going to do. But before that, we have a wonderful opportunity to discuss some of our experiences, perhaps, and contemplate them and share them, and maybe also to ask questions if that feels right or necessary, by dealing with these 2 questions. And these will very, very slowly evolve from one session to the other, but the first question would more or less always remain the same for these classes. And if you're watching this as a recording, these are questions that you can answer in person for yourself in journaling or simply orally, so as to hear the sound of your own voice. In our group session here, the best way would be to answer them in the chat. And so the first one here is, what was your practice experience over these 7 days, give or take, since our last session, essentially? And this can be anything, something you consider to be successful, something that you consider to be a challenge that arose, or just peculiar things that happened, or things that have to do with the logic of practice, with the content of practice, with your daily schedule, with changing old habits, truly anything. And of course, any questions associated with these methods when something wasn't particularly clear. So there's that. And then the second question that has to do with what we discussed last time in terms of genuine well-being and temporary well-being, or hedonic and eudaimonic happiness. What did contemplating eudaimonic well-being remind you of, make you think about? Were there any discoveries that you made about your daily schedule, where you noticed, oh, I am not maybe spending much time on eudaimonic well-being, or by contrast, maybe I am actually dedicating a lot of my time every day to eudaimonic well-being? Absolutely possible. Any of these responses, anything that is your personal understanding of this. So please share something in the chat while I'm sitting here with my tea. And I'm not only very curious, I'd be also very happy to inspire myself and others by reading these out for everyone to hear. But once again, if you prefer to address it to me personally so that others don't see your name in the chat, they don't know that that comment is coming from you, absolutely fine as well. You can just send it to me. And I'll still read that out by, but without saying your name out loud. So one point here is, it is always a challenge for me to practice alone. I love to practice in the Sangha. Absolutely. That's a fairly common experience. And there's a different energetic quality to practicing with the Sangha. Our practice is in a way multiplied. That's certainly the understanding of the Buddhist tradition. And when our practice is in that way enhanced, it can be very, very inspiring. That being said, of course, some people find a lot of inspiration in practicing on their own, because we are in a way moving away from the world, from the hustle and bustle, but also even from others with their unsettled energy in a way. And we put ourselves in a teeny tiny bubble of practice, which I like to describe as a retreat bubble. Even if we're practicing for 15 minutes, we are in a way in that period of time for 15 minutes in a unique solitary bubble of reality where we can go deeply into our mind and work on it. And one of the most prominent contemplatives in Tibetan history and the Tibetan tradition described it as the body, used the metaphor of our body being a retreat house and our mind being the retreatant in it. So going into the body and then doing our practice after we have settled the body in the way that we did in the beginning of the session, we, of course, gain that unique opportunity to do our inner work, go into the workshop of the mind with the help of our body as the support. So slowly, we develop an appreciation for both of these modes. At least that's my experience. I like to practice in a community for sure. There's a lot of power and energy in that, online or in person. And also, I very much appreciate my solitary practice. It's really nice to have that. This is about my daily practice, not exactly about this retreat, but I will be very grateful if you could give your opinion. Lama Allen, in his retreat, The Wisdom of Atisha, taught how to deal with bad feelings and mental afflictions about feelings that appear in the mind spontaneously or triggered by external factors. How can we do when we wake up depressed without knowing why? Probably because of dreams that we cannot remember when we wake up. Well, that's a very good question, very practical, and actually quite pertinent to our course, and also quite pertinent to the other course that I'm teaching right now called Cultivating Emotional Balance, the full version of that, the 42-hour version of that, also stemming from the lineage of Lama Allen Wallace, Dr. Paul Ekman, and Dr. Eve Ekman. Why I'm mentioning that other course is that in Cultivating Emotional Balance as a system of knowledge that comes both from the Buddhist tradition and the affective psychology system of knowledge, there is a lot of discussion about the difference between our emotions, which are more transitory states that are triggered, they occur, they unfold, and then they disappear, usually in about 90 seconds, and sometimes they can be re-triggered many times in a row, but generally they're more short-lasting and they have an identifiable trigger. So there's that these are emotions, and then by contrast, there are so-called moods, and these moods, these energetic or mental or states can last for days, for weeks, for months, in some cases, very rarely though, but at least for hours. And when we are in a specific mood, it is, of course, a bit more difficult to transform than a particular emotion, but also these moods don't always have, these states called moods, don't always have an identifiable trigger. And so we might just suddenly become a bit anxious, not with anxiety as a specific acute experience, but just that undertone of being easily triggered, easily going into a fearful state. That's the fearful mode. Similarly with the sad mood, feeling melancholic, or the irritable mood, and so forth. So when we are in one of those moods, of course, it is a bit more difficult to simply direct our awareness to it and then wait for it to dissipate, which would be quite possible with emotions. Emotion is more of a powerful energy wave that, however, dissipates quite quickly. So when we observe it, for example, the sudden onslaught of anger, if we are mindful enough, if we have that level of inner skill, if we have that level of emotional hygiene, we would be able to, and that's one of the many techniques that we could use, would be able to look at that state, that wave of emotion, and let it pass and let it dissolve, let it release itself. With moods, which are sort of like an ambience in the room that is our mind and our body also, it's a bit more difficult because I can be in a somewhat melancholic mood, and I can look at that. I'm looking. Well, I am still in a melancholic mood. Why? Because there is that difference between emotions and moods, according to the CB model. Well, that doesn't mean it's hopeless at all. I still have a lot of different tools that I could be using. One of that tools would be to switch the object of my attention, choose another object of my attention, and attend to it powerfully in a way that would help me feel recharged. That would, of course, also depend on previous training. But for instance, if I'm in a slightly melancholic mood, if I were to switch my attention to the different objects of joy and then do some gratitude practice, or a practice where I am joyful about all the joys present in my life, that's empathetic joy directed at myself. We'll work on that practice later in this course. Or if I do a lot of practice of rejoicing, I might notice some shifts in my mood. And quite often, gratitude practice, empathetic joy practice, rejoicing practice, and a special practice where we attend to the sensory pleasures and joys, sometimes called harvesting joy. All these 4 different types of joy training could be quite good for switching our sad moods, for example. For our fearful moods, when we wake up and we're a bit anxious because, for example, we had some anxiety-inducing dreams and so forth, we could be using practices where we use insight and clarity of vision and clarity of analysis to make ourselves feel deeply grounded and to see that the danger that we might be feeling somewhat on a less conscious level, but it's still somewhere there, it's not that real. Or for some people who are quite devotional in their nature and in terms of their practice, they could instead do practices associated with deeply taking refuge in some source of protection. And whether that's the Buddha or Tara or Guru Rinpoche or Jesus, the Virgin Mary, the Holy Trinity or Allah and so forth would depend on the specific tradition of that person. But taking refuge deeply is one of the known antidotes for just that mood of feeling slightly insecure. But equally, it could all be transformed by a very powerful practice of the 4 immeasurables. So we're noticing that we are in this somewhat irritable mood, and then we switch. We open our eye of loving kindness and we look at all beings with loving kindness, and we extend loving kindness to all beings. And we truly do that powerfully, but we do that for not just maybe for 3 minutes, but we do that for a certain period of time, 5 minutes, 10, 15, 20, however long it takes, and that would depend on our intensity of our practice. But then in the aftermath of that, we could see, hey, the mood did switch. And of course, these are not the only potential options, because we could also, that's possible, just honor the mood without allowing it to alter our behavior in major ways. So for example, if I am today, due to the dreams I had or something imperceptible, feeling some melancholy, it could be fine. It could be enough for me to say, hey, that's my energetic mood today. That's my mode. I can prevent myself from sliding into profound sadness, which prevents me from doing something that is meaningful. So I will not allow myself going down that path, but just that ambience in my inner room, just that taste of some melancholy is fine. It's going to pass away. Moods are impermanent. So I could just work with that. And these are some of the solutions that would be available. So using a specific antidote or just honoring the mood, but not allowing it to affect us deeply are the simpler solutions. There are more profound ones that are available at the more profound and advanced stages of practice. But let's start with the basics, and then we can gradually make our way up to those more advanced techniques as well. When thinking of loving kindness for myself, I think of practicing Dharma for the benefit of others. Given this, does this mean that loving kindness is related to renunciation, given it arising the aspiration to practice the Dharma to free oneself from suffering, specifically metta for oneself? Absolutely. Well, not only a valid question, but the simple answer is yes. And that is to say, one way to define renunciation in the Buddhist tradition, renunciation is understood in the Indo-Tibetan Buddhist tradition, Ngejung in Tibetan, which Lama Alan Wallace translates sometimes as the spirit of emergence. So one way to define that, renunciation, that's the more common translation, is to say that renunciation is compassion for oneself. It's the wish to liberate oneself from suffering and the causes of suffering. And of course, renunciation or Ngejung would also mean that we need to have some understanding of the causes of suffering, which specifically pertains to things like destructive karma, destructive compulsive imprints, and afflictive mental states. Equally, we could say that on the other side of that same coin, renunciation is just a genuinely stable and clear form of loving kindness for oneself. Why? Because we want to bring ourselves to genuine flourishing, not just the temporary flourishing of having some hedonic pleasures, which is also nice and important, but the more profound experience of true well-being where we are free, aspiring for a state of freedom beyond different types of suffering. That is loving kindness for ourselves, the more profound form of it that goes beyond simply wishing for good stuff to happen to us, which is also important. But absolutely, from that point of view, we could define and explain renunciation, the spirit of emergence, Ngejung, as a type of loving kindness for ourselves and compassion for ourselves, which is why then in the approach, in the Tibetan Buddhist approach that talks about the so-called stages of the path, which is the common framework for the Gelug tradition of Buddhism, but not only, other traditions use it as well. There is that progression from truly cultivating this understanding and this kindness for ourselves, this compassion for ourselves, the kindness for ourselves, and then slowly extending it to others. And that's the progression from the level of our practice where we're mostly focused on our own well-being to the level of our practice where we are suddenly able to take the responsibility for everyone's well-being. That's, of course, quite advanced. But the progression is very natural because it's going from what is truly good for me to what is truly good for everyone. Absolutely. Lessening of anxiety and more acceptance of things I find disagreeable. That's one of the observations here, and that's what arose out of these practices and contemplations, and that's wonderful. So absolutely, lessening of anxiety and acceptance of things I find disagreeable. It's a wonderful, wonderful gifts to experience, but these are gifts brought about by our own practice. These are our own gifts to ourselves, or we could say these are the gifts brought forth from our basic goodness. And what we did is just practiced a little bit to help us uncover more of that, and hopefully more of that coming. Absolutely. Enjoyed permission to go slow and pace my energy, felt harmonious and in flow. That's one of the great blessings, I think, of not only the Tibetan tradition, which is quite gentle in how it allows our practice to unfold without suddenly putting us in an environment where we have to do 10 hours of practice a day, and that's our first step on the path. You know, there are traditions where organizations in this world that suggest that can be very important. They're very powerful and very transformative, even if not always trauma informed necessarily. But the gentle approach of doing a few minutes here, a few minutes there, just a few minutes overall, and then, as Tibetans say, kale kale, slowly, slowly, is a nice reminder to always have. We are progressing at our own pace. And then, as the Dalai Lama often says, when we're looking back on how much we have changed in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, of course, there would be some noticeable progress if we did apply the effort. Absolutely. Contemplating eudaimonic well-being reminded me of how spacious the space of my mind can be, including the emotions and reactions of myself and others, maintaining stillness in the motion of all these stimuli. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, in a way, even the quote unquote foundational, basic, preparatory practice of settling our body, speech, and mind from a certain point of view includes the entirety of the path, because in some formulations of the overall approach to contemplative practice, and especially in some approaches used in the Tibetan lineage of that, the approach of Great Seal, the approach of the Great Perfection, as they are called, but not only, there are many more traditions like this in the world. The whole idea is to rest in a stillness that is so profound and transformative that everything that is out of touch of reality can fall away, and everything that is in touch with reality, loving kindness, compassion, joy, generosity, and so forth, can just naturally spring forth. For many of us, we don't only rely on that approach. We add elements of practices where we are actively doing something, where we are actively cultivating loving kindness, practicing generosity, going here, doing there, fingering our malas and turning our prayer wheels, reciting prayers and visualizing stuff and doing journaling and so forth. All of those practices with effort in a way. And they don't have to be religious. There are many secular exercises of the same nature. But then beyond that, it's always nice to return to the aspect of simplicity, where just through resting in stillness, basic goodness already comes forth. I find the vision quest a difficult practice to do. I have a hard time envisioning my life moving into a state of eudaimonic well-being in a specific way. I have a friend who I believe is living a life of eudaimonic well-being, and I imagined how my life might be like hers. That seemed to help me with this practice. Absolutely, that is a viable approach. Another viable approach, or perhaps something that would contribute to the same understanding, is simply asking ourselves, what qualities would I experience in the state of eudaimonic well-being, right? And we can ask that when we're out of formal meditation, for example, when we're journaling on the same 4 questions. So it doesn't have to be an image of ourselves in a specific place, doing a specific thing, and so forth, even though those are what come to some people when they do this practice. It might also be, as I've mentioned, just about understanding, oh, I would be experiencing calm, peace, tranquility, joy. I would be eager to help, and so forth. And any quality of this nature that comes to mind is an artistic stroke that we add to that picture, and that's enough. It's enough to have a very general understanding like that, with just a few strokes like this, but we're aspiring to them because we are validly convinced that, yes, eudaimonic well-being, and also some level of hedonic well-being, some dignified hedonic well-being, this is what they would entail, these qualities. That's absolutely enough. In addition to that, in July, we'll run a very lovely session with one of my own mentors, Andy Wilson, and in that we would explore a different approach to Vision Quest, where we, guided by her, would do a meditation that uses some aspects of guided imagery, Jungian work, and so forth, to establish a greater level understanding for what our individual unique flourishing might entail. So some people might also find that approach helpful. We'll be sending out information about that very soon, and the session itself is going to be in July. When I saw a stranger, I somehow asked myself, will I see him again? Probably not. How many times I've met strangers twice? So the best way to act with any stranger is with love, with compassion. Absolutely that. Absolutely the right conclusion, and a very interesting thought process that is also valid. In one way, we can say we are only meeting each other once, so why not be kind? In a different way, which would of course be close to the logic of the Buddhist tradition and the Hindu tradition, we're constantly meeting each other, but also all the more reasons to be kind and compassionate, because we're going to meet again, and whatever energy we put out now will come back to us later. And a third approach, I think, is this very lovely phrase that Ramdas sometimes used to say, and that is, we're all walking each other home. So in a way, we might be seeing someone for 5 seconds, but hopefully even in those 5 seconds, we're somehow walking with them towards greater well-being. That is our home, our spiritual home, genuine flourishing. So of course, as we're walking on this road together for 3 seconds on the subway, maybe we could fill those 3 seconds with love, with kindness, with patience, with tenderness, with understanding, with empathy, and so forth. So many ways of viewing reality from these different points of view, but the conclusion is kind of the same. We do have to be pumping the energy of loving kindness and compassion into the system, the matrix of interdependence that we find ourselves in. If the four immeasurables are not a feeling per se, which I think Lamel has emphasized, how do we identify or feel when our mind is in a state of loving kindness? That's a very good question, and we will come back to it next time in our next class, which will be specifically exploring loving kindness as one of the four immeasurables. For now, we're still doing the foundational work, because as you would learn from the book, The Four Immeasurables, that is our reading for this course, the book itself does not start with loving kindness. It starts with the more foundational aspects of ethics and shamatha, and that's what we're going to briefly discuss today to just reestablish that foundation. I refound my appreciation for meditation and the calm that it brings me, no matter how short-lived. This spurs me on to find more time for meditation during the day, which I was able to do. This helps me deal with the hurdles that I encounter through the week and reinforce that I must make time to relax and slow down. Absolutely, and how inspiring for me to be reading this out, to be reading this at all, but also as an additional note, I would also say it's truly beautiful that many of the types of contemplative practice that we can do are not just practices where we have to assume a formal position on a meditation cushion, or where we have to assume the supine position. Of course, we do need to do those. We do need to do a few minutes, so we can ideally do a few minutes of formal practice here and a few minutes of formal practice there, sort of in maybe even in a specially designated place for practice that we use for meditation, for contemplation, for our spiritual practice. Perfectly, absolutely fine, valid, necessary, important. But beyond that, there's so much beauty in, for example, taking a walk in nature, sitting down on a log, and then settling our body, speech, and mind in that natural environment, which for me as a person who's as a facilitator who works more and more often with echo dharma practices, which are sort of the practices that are dharmic practices associated with nature and protecting nature, benefiting from nature and protecting nature. One of my favorite practices in that is, yes, settling our body, speech, and mind in a natural environment. And in a way, no biggie, you know, it's not fancy looking. You're just sitting somewhere surrounded by a few flowers next to a waterfall, next to a river, or just somewhere where there's a little bit of grass or a cactus plant. That's nature. But releasing everything, just resting there, and maybe doing that for a minute or two, but already feeling recharged, already accessing the contemplative realm, opening our, as I like to use this metaphor, opening our eye of stillness, silence, and spaciousness, and resting with that. Also beautiful. And then beyond that, some people I know like to do loving kindness practice, sort of informally, but still powerfully, as they're knitting, or as they're stroking their dog's head, or as they're walking their dog, and of course in walking meditation and so forth. So in a way, all the joy that we receive from meditation, it can be combined with these other types of activities. And that also just makes our contemplative life so much more rich and rewarding. This would be quite an important part of cultivating four immeasurables, because we can't only cultivate them on the cushion. We would also have to find these creative ways of doing them in informal settings. And that's wonderful. We'll have that creative challenge in front of us for this course. Taking time for myself, going inward and leading with purpose, felt hedonic versus eudaimonic. Yeah, I mean, it can be both. We can take time for ourselves to undertake very important hedonic tasks of letting our body rest, washing ourselves, taking care of our physical health, just allowing our mind to relax after a very busy workday. And that's fine. We do need all those types of hedonic care. But of course, we could also be taking time for ourselves to balance our mind, to work on its habits, and that's eudaimonic, absolutely. So both. I find myself meditating on eudaimonic well-being and grounding myself with going slower and observing more. That's a very good reason to rejoice in what we've done. How wonderful that I've been able to do that. May that continue. May I be able to continue that, to keep this eudaimonic impulse, momentum of this practice, and to hopefully not only carry it through this course, and that would be wonderful, 10 classes, then the additional one, and so lovely. But beyond that, 5 years from now, may I not forget this word, eudaimonic well-being, this phrase. May I still consider what it means and work on it and cultivate it slowly, so that when I look back on these 5 years, there's still an improvement. I realized that eudaimonic activities are harder to schedule. They require effort to do them. In contrast, it's easy to fall into hedonic activities. They're not hard to do, but breaking the habit of doing them is hard. That's absolutely true. And in some cases, when people start thinking about this issue of hedonic activity and eudaimonic activity, a more coarse associations come to mind, as in we think, oh, hedonic activities, that's probably stuff like drinking beer or playing football or something like that. And then eudaimonic activities is maybe meditating, praying, and so forth. But it's actually much more subtle because, of course, when we distract our mind by just scrolling through our phone meaninglessly for 4 hours at an end, that's also very hedonic because we're stimulating our mind and we are using our attention in a very specific way to laugh at some funny pictures and to be entertained by something, to learn the news, to be surprised, to be horrified, and so forth. Yes, absolutely hedonic, but much more difficult to not slip into. That's because we think, okay, that's relaxing. And this is where just adding a few minutes of eudaimonic well-being here and there is a helpful way to begin. For many people, and for me as well, maybe just starting with, I'm going to do 30 minutes of meditation here, and then 30 here, and then 30 here, and then an hour here, and then 2 hours there. That's a tall order. That's not always easy. But knowing, hey, as I go throughout my day, I can rest in loving kindness for 4 minutes here. And while I'm walking there, I'm going to be mindfully aware and so forth. And just doing those teeny tiny bits slowly, once again, that is a thing that then would gradually flower into a strong aspiration and a strong habit of experiencing eudaimonic well-being, but also of pursuing eudaimonic well-being on a greater to a greater depth. Okay, then beyond that, I realize that many of the things I tend to rush through, for example, gardening chores, are actually something I should take joy in because it is contributing to eudaimonic well-being, because I'm creating habitat for birds and other creatures and connecting with the earth. Absolutely that. And also, that's a good example of an eco-dharma activity. You are doing something with the natural world to support the natural world. You're receiving the sustenance from the natural world, as in you are in contact with the elements and with the flora and with the fauna, and that is supportive. And you are absolutely practicing a type of generosity. So that is a eudaimonic activity. Absolutely wonderful. Another good reason to rejoice, helping beings. Changing all habits is tough and need to make specific time for practice or daily activities will take charge of my time and my attention. When I did practice, I enjoyed the opportunity for focus and stillness. It's one of my favorite things, but I seem to require quiet to do it, and I have trouble doing it in a chaotic environment. Yeah, it is in a way, of course, also an issue of habit, because as we cultivate this habit of stillness and so forth, it becomes more easily available to us, even in public transportation, and even when we are surrounded by multiple people doing stuff. Sometimes here in Kathmandu, living next to the Bodhanath Stupa, which is a very important hub for not only spiritual activity, but also worldly activity, I would, during the evening, do circumambulations of the stupa itself and see hundreds of people walking around. And yet sometimes you would see a practitioner sitting somewhere on the steps of a store that's already closed for the night, or on a bench, and deep in their meditation, not making a show out of it or anything, but just you can see for some of them, not for all, but for some of them, that they are able to access stillness and whatever other states that they're cultivating while being surrounded by so many people. So it does come with the territory, of course. Then contemplating eudaimonic well-being reminded me of the fundamental goodness and beauty of creation, and it gave me hope and courage to persevere. Yeah, I think even knowing that eudaimonic well-being exists and that we can learn about it and then share it with the world, as in the world needs more information about eudaimonic well-being. That's the reason to have some hope about the future of humanity. Absolutely. And that's, I think, one thing that the Dalai Lama always emphasizes. The more we learn about inner hygiene, emotional hygiene, and that is a very big thing that he promotes, and that he associates teach through programs like Cultivating Emotional Balance, which was developed under his guidance, and then the Social, Ethical, and Emotional Learning, which is a program for children developed by Emory University under the guidance of the Dalai Lama, and so forth. There are many approaches like that. All of those are about inner hygiene, but beyond that, they contribute, according to the Dalai Lama's view, to the overall well-being of the world, giving us hope, and also hope on a personal level. And two final observations here. The inner critic was very certain that I did not do many eudaimonic activities, but when I did the analysis, I was pleasantly surprised that I did more than the critic thought I was doing. That's quite often the case, and that's beautiful, isn't it? But at the same time, of course, there is a rare chance that some people would, on the contrary, think, oh, I'm doing a lot of eudaimonic stuff. And then when they actually count, they would say, oh, not so much. There's more that I could be doing. But in either case, that honest analysis brings us closer to a balanced vision. We did do something, could have done more perhaps. Either way, it's fine to progress slowly, but it is also something already to rejoice in, to be happy about, to strengthen. And that's wonderful. When I look at the beauty of nature or hear the oceans roar and feel a sense of awe or peacefulness, is that hedonic or eudaimonic well-being? That's a very good question. There's an element of both there. There is an element of being stimulated by the majestic views, by the beautiful sounds of nature, of the sea, or the roaring of wind, and so forth. That's hedonic, but because nature is nature, it has a powerful ability to bring us in contact with the eudaimonic qualities that nature represents. So the actual space represents the inner spaciousness. Water represents our ability to feel comfort and to flow, and so forth. This is not an Ekodharma course, even though there's, of course, always a connection. But all of the, according to the Indo-Tibetan vision of things, all of the 5 elements correspond to specific eudaimonic qualities that we might cultivate. And we have some experience of them, we have some glimpse of them when we are experiencing nature. Not just nature, we could look at a beautiful, majestic work of religious art and experience hedonic pleasure from how well it is, how beautiful it is. We look at an incredible painting of Virgin Mary or an incredible statue of Tara and so forth, right? Or an incredible statue of Kuan Yin. We look at that, we experience hedonic pleasure of, wow, beautiful. But beyond that, there's also the eudaimonic joy of being reminded of the qualities that these works of art represent. And that is one of the most powerful things that art can do for us. But similarly, nature, equally, music, some types of theater, movie making, absolutely. Even what we think of, oh, that's so trivial, that's just Hollywood, that's not art house. But something might be responding from the outside and saying, hey, yeah, there is an element of eudaimonic well-being activated by these contributing conditions. So it could be both. So there's value in resting in our contact with nature. Wonderful observations, and I'm very grateful to all of you for sharing your experiences, and please continue to do so. We will be doing these checkups every time. They're very important for the fabric of this course, and I hope that if you're watching the recording, you're also finding value in hearing about people's experiences, Because of course, when there's something that was working out, something that was successful, so, or that was success, we can think, wow, how wonderful. May my practice also flourish. May everyone's practice flourish. But when there is a challenge or a question, we'll learn from dealing with it. Not because my answers are helpful in any way, but just it's nice to consider those together. So my deepest gratitude to all of you for sharing all these things. And we're going to now slowly move into the next part. And last time there was a request for these 5-minute breaks. I would like to, in this case, invite you to, of course, do what you need to do as we're still going along, because this part with the discussion is quite long and also very necessary. So while I'm slowly reading out everything from all the observations, everything that was shared in the chat, this would be a good time to stretch your legs if you need to, get your cup of tea, or just turn your camera off, wander into the distance and so forth. Why? Because I want the remaining time to also allow us to explore the concepts that we need to look at today, and then to do our final meditation as well. So please bear with me, and absolutely feel free to do what you need to do to take good care of your body. So one thing to revisit, and this of course would be very deeply familiar to most of the advanced practitioners present here, and I consider myself to be a beginner in the presence of advanced practitioners, simply summarizing things so that we can all benefit from them. So one very helpful, of course, thing to summarize is the very idea of meditation as presented in the Indo-Tibetan cultural tradition, which not only covers the Tibetan Buddhism as we know it, but also the noble Bön tradition, the indigenous spiritual tradition of Tibet, which has over time became very close to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition that came from India, Nepal, and other regions. So in this overall dance of these two traditions, this definition, this idea, I think would be shared. Defining meditation as the process of intentionally habituating our mind to wholesome states, qualities, and skills. Many people, especially those who have studied with Lama Alan Wallace for a long time, but also have heard the Dalai Lama teach on meditation, or other Tibetan Lamas, or their Western disciples and so forth, would know that this definition simply corresponds to two words used to describe what Buddhists understand by meditation in Tibetan and in Sanskrit and Pali languages, respectively. So gom is the Tibetan verbal root, which literally can be translated as to habituate, to familiarize. And so in Tibetan, you would have phrases like, quite literally, I was familiarizing with impermanence. I was habituating myself to impermanence. Myself is actually not included in the actual Tibetan phrase. So it would be simply, I was familiarizing with impermanence, meaning I was meditating on impermanence, or I was habituating to loving kindness. Myself is also grammatically absent there. So, okay, good to know. What does it mean? I was meditating on loving kindness, or I allowed my mind to transform into loving kindness. And we will look deeply into the concept of it next time, but just the general idea is clear. I would transform my mind into a kind state, into an attitude of kindness, and I rested in it for as long as it took me to habituate myself to that state a little bit more than before. And of course, the length of meditation is not the only criterion there, because we would also need to do the meditation repeatedly. So it's not an issue of habituating ourselves to something like loving kindness for 2 hours instead of 5 minutes, and then by the end of it, we're done. No, just like with any physical training, this type of habituation would take time. So every day, again and again, over a lot of time, a long period of time, we are habituating our minds to something helpful, something beneficial, something wholesome. Wholesome here simply means able to contribute to happiness, to well-being, to eudaimonic well-being, and also ideally to even to a balanced type of hedonic well-being as well. So that's why some types of meditation are used to increase productivity and so forth, even though there's also an ethical discussion around such applications of mindfulness, meditation, emotional awareness, and so forth. So GOM, habituation, familiarization, that's one idea. Then bhavana, the Sanskrit and the Pali term for meditation, more closely attuned with the idea of cultivating something, in cultivation, like cultivating a field or cultivating a specific plant, and that we are growing something. But where is that growth happening? It's happening in the mind, in our mental dimension, the part of us that is the mind. We're cultivating, once again, something that is wholesome. And these are states, attitudes, qualities, skills, and so forth. So meditating on the four immeasurables, which is the topic, the theme for this course, would be habituating our mind to these four attitudes. Why do we want to habituate ourselves to them? So that they become more habitual, so that they become our natural response to other beings, like in that story about seeing the stranger, and then reminding ourselves that, yeah, even if we only meet for 3 seconds and then never again, why wouldn't ideally my natural response to you be kindness or compassion or empathetic joy, or at least just equanimity, open-hearted evenness? Ideally all four, depending on specific modulations of each situation. So making these wholesome attitudes habitual, that's the purpose for meditating on the four immeasurables. But of course, the practice of the four immeasurables does not exist in isolation from everything else that is included in the great wisdom traditions of the world. There are always more practices to do. So before we go into presenting the overall structure of practices that four immeasurables are included into, before we go into seeing where do the four immeasurables belong on the map of contemplative practice, either in the secular approach or in the Buddhist approach, and we would see a lot of similarities with other traditions. The question here for us to consider, and this could be a question for a lot of journaling, or simply for us to consider right this moment, is what it says here on the slide. What in my life experiences in the domains of emotions, habits, habitual ways of thinking would I like to change? And I would very much invite us to journal on this question, not right now, not right this minute, but once again, like we did last time, we would send this question out, and then you would be invited, if you have the time, the space, the inspiration, the pens, the bits of paper, and so forth, or the devices that you use for journaling, you would be able to consider this. And just, once again, in the same way that we did in the Vision Quest, think, hey, this is how I would want some of my habits to change, and maybe some of my emotions, maybe less anxiety here, less irritation there, being able to transform my moods more quickly when those moods are not contributing to my happiness, or to honor my moods and that I allow them to be, but I'm also not controlled by them. So I'm not moody, essentially. Yeah, absolutely. We can consider this, and it will be unique and personal. And it's also fine to draw something instead of writing. Some people are more visual, but as long as the drawing or the painting maybe even represents an answer to this question that is meaningful to you, that's a creative undertaking that is very, very worthwhile to do. But then there's a second question here, and that is the one that I would like to spend a moment or two on. How would I like to transform my life appearances? So these life appearances is a concept that we're slowly going to be introducing ourselves to, and that is a very deeply Buddhist concept, but Buddhist not in that it has to do with religion and reincarnation and so forth, mantras or statues of the Buddha or incense or anything like that. It's a concept from some specific subsets of Buddhist psychology and Buddhist epistemological science, in that it is part of the understanding of how we cognize and interpret reality. So we could go about it in a very intellectual way and use very fancy words and get lost in that. And there is a lot of value in doing very deeply logical, elaborate exploration there. But I would like to invite a much more simple approach in this case, and that is for us to, for a moment, think that everything we're seeing right now with our eyes, the visual images in front of us, to our sides, so everything in the elliptical field of our vision, and everything we're hearing, and all the smells, and all the tastes, and all the tactile sensations, and then finally all of our thoughts, mental images, memories, so the mental domain with all of its, everything that's arising in it, all of that collectively is like our own personal holographic appearance right now. That's the bubble of appearances, as it is called. So in the Buddhist oral tradition, you would sometimes hear it being called a karmic bubble these days, mostly by modern teachers, as in we are in this projected reality. It doesn't mean it's not real, not functional, and so forth. No, it is functional enough for us, absolutely. But in a way, we could say, hey, this is my little personal movie theater. This is what I'm seeing. Not just on the screen where there's a slide and a talking head and all of that, pixels and colors and shapes. But beyond that, all the cups and the itching sensations in my left foot and my thoughts, which in some cases become so strong that they completely supersede the sensory reality for me. I'm lost in my thoughts. I'm no longer seeing what's in front of me, and instead I'm in these memories from 50 years ago. All of this is part of my little movie theater. And in addition to that, in this movie theater are my emotions, my responses, my attitudes, my moods, how I feel about all of this stuff, and then what I do with all of this stuff through my actions of body, speech, and mind. Okay, these are our life appearances, this little movie theater that we exist on. So if we were indeed a little alien somewhere that has put on a VR set and gone into this reality to play this video game where we are this person, these appearances that we are completely believing in, this would be the life appearances that we're considering in this second question. But then we're looking at that and we're asking ourselves, well, what would I like to change about them? Some aspects are hedonic. I would like to sell the house, buy an apartment, sell an apartment, buy a house, change the job, get married, get divorced. Absolutely fine. We consider that. And then beyond that, we think, oh, well, what about my moods, my emotions, my feelings, my thoughts, recurring thoughts, maybe. Again and again, every day, I think about how horrible I am or how horrible everyone else is, everyone but me. So those things, which ones would I like to change so that the overall feeling of this virtual reality that I'm in a way, would be transformed? That's a question to play around with and to consider. And so if at some point during the day or during this week, you do find yourself sitting somewhere on a log or on the beach, being contemplative and considering things or journaling, that would be a nice thing to explore as well. It is very similar. This question is very similar to the one or all of the vision quests. But this is where we begin. And at the very least, I would say, just like we did last time, we would like to introduce greater levels of subjective happiness to all of this. Even if we can't make any hedonic changes, and some people truly can't, people who are, for example, right now in concentration camps, like at least two of the great lamas that have been privileged to meet in this life, Garchen Rinpoche and Yangtang Rinpoche, both of them spent a lot of time in concentration camps. They couldn't change the outer appearances in that the camp just goes away. They did do some unusual activities there that were considered miracles by others, but beyond that, they were still physically in that environment surrounded by others. So not much change there. Not the same freedom as some of us have where we could move to another country or go to another city or move to another apartment. So sometimes those things are not available and sometimes they are. But beyond that, thinking, what about the eudaimonic, the subjective level? What is it that I would like to change? At least greater level of well-being. Well, and this is where our contemplative practice comes about. It comes in addition to things like therapy, body work, and other modalities that are very helpful, very necessary, very important for many of us. In addition to those, we introduce the level of what we associate with meditation, but actually in this tradition of practice, the tradition of practice that the Four Immeasurables belong to, we have these three major, as Lama Alan Wallace sometimes calls it, three major food groups of practice that we need to include in our meditation diet to keep it truly balanced. If we limit ourselves to just one of these food groups, there is something missing. And that has been also the working understanding of the Buddhist tradition ever since the times of the Buddha, because the Buddha himself did comment on this issue of saying, hey, well, if you only do mental stability practices, it's good, but your mind can become very dry. And so to keep it balanced, you do need practices that's associated with developing kindness, compassion, and so forth. But beyond that, just being kind and not being wise, not having clarity of vision, that would also not be truly balanced. So you need to balance kindness and insight, wisdom. And that is all supported by mental stability. So kind of these three aspects of practice are in synergy. They're supporting each other. And slowly, once again, we gather all three food groups. Initially, we might be doing only one practice, and even that for just a little while, 3 minutes here, 3 minutes in the evening. That's fine. Some of these practices would only belong to only one of these categories. That's where we begin. Gradually, over time, as we go through months and then years of practice, we would assemble a menu, a dinner set, lunch set that includes these three food groups. And then our practice would become more balanced. And these food groups are not the only thing that is available to us, because some traditions, including the Tibetan tradition, and not just the Tibetan tradition, because there are many other lineages in this world that use the same thing. Some traditions use devotional practice as well to support all of this. Visualization practices, chanting practices. Very generically, these are sometimes addressed, called devotional practices, things where we visualize someone, we say aspiration prayers, we recite mantras and so forth. All of that has psychological logic behind it, and it has to be clearly understood by us and then used appropriately. But those practices can be very supportive of these three main food groups. However, some people feel very unsure about those devotional elements, but quite open to contemplative practice, meditation, mindfulness, and so forth. And for them, at least these three food groups would be quite wonderful to combine. So once again, to reiterate what it says here on the slide, cultivating the causes for long-lasting inner well-being entails intentionally working on the different aspects of our mind, including our mental stability, that is the stability of our attention. Is our attention jumping all over the place, or is it focused? Is it relaxed, stable, and clear? These are the three qualities for mental stability that we might want to cultivate in the long run. Then the strength of our kindness, and also how expansive our kindness is in terms of its object. And here kindness is used very general terms, because within that we find loving kindness or love, or metta or maitri, and we find compassion and empathetic joy and equanimity. So the four immeasurables, all of them. But beyond that, other facets or expressions of the same thing. Generosity is an expression of all four in a way, but it also could be seen as the expression of specifically loving kindness. But we could also think about the quality of empathy, important for all the four immeasurables. We could also think about the quality of gratitude that also plays its own role in all of this. So just these practices or qualities that are associated with our heart in our colloquial way of talking of things, in our day-to-day way of describing things, heart-related stuff, heart-related practices. Very beautiful, very nice. Some of them are also mental stability practices. We'll talk about that when we deal with each of the four immeasurables. Some of them serve as a wonderful foundation for insight practices, this last category that helps us cultivate exceptional levels of common sense or wisdom. But ideally, we would have all three over time. So let's think of this as eventually our goal, having a balanced contemplative diet. In addition to that, that's Buddha's working hypothesis about changing our life appearances so that there is more happiness. And this is the theme that comes in very powerfully in the first chapter of the book, Lama Allen's book on the four immeasurables. And cultivating the inner resources, we're using three aspects of inner training that Robert Thurman likes to call three types of education, and that are in the Buddhist tradition called three trainings, and then three higher trainings. When we're just doing them to become an educated person with a good level of mental hygiene, emotional hygiene, they're called three trainings. When they're done with the aspiration to become liberated from the cycles of suffering, or when they're done with the motivation to become fully awakened and then to liberate others from the cycles of suffering. So when they're done for the sake of nirvana, personal nirvana or all-encompassing nirvana, then they're called three higher trainings. They're called higher because the motivation is upgraded, and along with it, the intensity and the depth of these practices. They can also be just done to become a nice person. Then they're simply called three trainings. But essentially, it's three ways of educating ourselves, which is the meaning of the Sanskrit term of shiksha, cultivating, basically education has to do with being a student and learning. So the first level, there is ethical discipline, and you would see that Dr. Wallace does comment on that topic in the beginning of the book on the four immeasurables. Then there's the training in mental stability or coherence. So once again, our attention skills, but not just becoming better at concentrating on our Word documents, Excel documents, PowerPoint documents, and so forth, and then sending them to our boss on time. Not just that, which is how some global corporations see mindfulness. They see it as a means to an end, but the end is making our employees more productive so that they do submit the documents on time and we earn more money. That is absolutely the motivation for why some organizations teach mindfulness skills to their employees. Still valuable in that the employees are still learning that. And of course, there are also organizations that are teaching that with the motivation to contribute to the well-being of the employees and then the company and then the world. So motivation can be very different, but kind of this training goes beyond that. It is not limited to simply being able to focus well. It's also about being able to gather our mental energy and truly heal our mind, undo the knots in our mind in a way where we become truly clear in terms of how the flow of our awareness, the flow of our mind works. So if right now our mind is a very muddy river, at least mine for sure is, with a lot of eddies, a lot of garbage, half rusty cars sticking right out of that water, and lots of stones and sticks and animals and dead fish and all sorts of stuff. That's my mind at the moment. If that's where we start, by the end of truly perfecting the practice of samadhi, we would have a beautiful, clear, pristinely pure river. And that, of course, is how the rivers in all Tibet used to look like. Having just arisen out of the melting snows of the Himalaya, it would be completely pure and completely transparent. So much that when the great contemplative Atisha came to Tibet, he was amazed by the quality of water, and he praised the 7 qualities of that pristinely pure, clear water flowing there. And I think that's still an image clearly present in our mind, which is why advertising companies are using that when they create all these ads about very, very, very pure water, but the ad is actually for processed bottled water. And we're still buying into that, and we're buying that bottled water and then polluting the environment more. Why? Because that's a very powerful image, the image of that free flow, completely pristinely pure. Well, that's what our awareness becomes like through the training in samadhi, or mental coherence, mental stability, mental gatheredness. And then clarity of cognition, which is wisdom, clarity of seeing the nature of reality as it is, prajna or pragya, as they say here in the northern Sanskrit pronunciation here in Nepal. There are two sort of main pronunciations, many more actually, but you would sometimes call it, here it's called prajna, which is the southern version, closer to southern India, or pragya here in Nepal, amongst the learned Brahmins. So clarity of knowledge, exceptional knowing of what? Of how reality works. Our person, our environment, the interdependence between all of us, the society, the environment, and so forth. So from the Buddha's point of view, that would be largely about seeing the interdependence between things, which is good enough. But as we would understand, the more we see the interdependence, the more free and pure, pristinely pure the flow of our awareness is, purified from all those half-rotten cars and dead fish and sticks and stones and everything, and just the moss, the more we would understand that our actions do have an effect on everything that's going on in the world. So there is that level of ethical dimension to our actions. But beyond that, our actions very largely affect our own well-being. What we do affects our level of eudaimonic well-being, which is why in this working hypothesis of the Buddha, we start by establishing a certain level of ethical discipline, and that already brings about a certain level of happiness, which is sometimes called happiness of having a clear conscience. Sometimes this happiness of having clear conscience is even broken into subcategories. Then we're not going to go deeply into that, but it's basically feeling good about ourselves because we know we're trying to practice nonviolence and to bring something good to this world. Like you've mentioned, building things for birds, gardening, trying to preserve this beautiful environment. That is such a huge thing to support our sense of self-worth. It's not the only source of self-worth, and it shouldn't be, but knowing we're doing something meaningful is in its own way a powerful part of eudaimonic well-being. So when we're practicing loving kindness and the ensuing immeasurables, already we're wishing ourselves and others this type of happiness. May I have, amongst other things, including the advanced bliss of true realization of the nature of reality and so forth, may I also have the happiness of clear conscience. Not me, not just me, everyone, including the people who are clearly not experiencing that because they are truly bringing incredible suffering and distraction to this world, mostly through their greed, in some cases through their hatred, and almost universally through their wrong views about the nature of happiness and how it can be brought about. So may they at least start by practicing genuine nonviolence. There are aspiration prayers for that, and just logical thinking. How do we spread that idea and help everyone establish that level? May they experience this happiness of ethical discipline. Discipline is a tricky word here because for us it might seem a bit restrictive. You know, I came to this course, I thought we're going to cultivate kindness and love, and those are beautiful. But discipline, that sounds restrictive. It sounds like somebody's limiting me. Not the idea here, not the understanding here. There's no imposition from the side of the slides or the Lobsang Tenpa who goes through these slides that any of us need to do some specific thing, and that's going to be the discipline imposed by this course. No, that's not the idea there. The general understanding is that, once again, we look at the flow of our actions first before we go to the mind, and we see that some of those actions are awkwardly out of touch with reality, cringy, essentially, when we think back to them. Paul Ekman talks about regrettable emotional episodes when we fly off the handle and then we regret that. Well, there are regrettable behavioral episodes where we do something and then looking back on that, we say, oh, well, I probably shouldn't have taken that person's lunch money back in junior school. Oh, I probably shouldn't have embezzled money or stolen this or killed the bug or whatever. And there are, of course, many actions that we could think of in terms of those regrettable behavioral episodes. So we work on those by considering our overall ethical practice, our ethical values, and so forth, trying to bring kindness into it, and then practicing with it, trying to be more kind, more gentle in how we behave, but also clear about establishing healthy boundaries and being nonviolent and respecting consent and so forth. All of those things that are very important in our common secular day-to-day interactions. So ethical discipline here means establishing basic levels of control over how we express the mental impulses that arise in our mind oh, why don't I do this? Or why don't I do that? You know, the stuff that comes up in our mind. How do we express those? By means of our body and speech. And a good example, of course, is the principle of, with regards to our speech, the principle of the four sieves that we have briefly mentioned last time. When we, before, for example, typing something and sending it to the chat and sharing it with everyone, we stop and think, would that be true? Maybe I'm making stuff up. That's not good. It's not good to be spreading misinformation when there's already so much misinformation in the world. So is that true? Do I know for a fact it's true? Is that necessary? Maybe I'm sharing something about the different types of tomatoes, but we're in a course in the four immeasurables. So even though that's interesting now, might not be, this is not necessary for this course, sharing that observation about tomatoes. Is it kind? Because maybe I'm really doing something out of maliciousness or just ignorantly and not kindly. And I've seen that happen when people share things in the chat, not in our course, but I've mentioned this last time. Sometimes people, for some reason, start sharing things about other people's bodies. That's not why we're here for. Please don't. No, that's not kind by definition. And then, is it the right time? Because maybe it is necessary and true and kind, but maybe in a couple of hours or in a couple of days or just later down the line. So that's absolutely secular. It's, at least that's absolutely universally applicable, but it's a good way to filter the impulse before it can live our system and start living on its own as a comment somewhere that we typed up, or as our words that fly out of our mouth and then maybe damage someone, truly hurt someone, traumatize someone in some cases. So just establishing those very, very gentle filters. And this is where the Buddha has historically proposed 5 such filters. And a more elaborate version of those is the monastic discipline that is to this day practiced in multiple Buddhist countries and multiple monastic communities or monks and nuns all over the world. An elaborate version of that is the monastic discipline. An essentialized version of that is this set of principles called Panchashila. And then this term Panchashila, because it became so important, it was later even adopted in diplomacy for other sets of 5 principles with regards to diplomatic relationships between countries. But it was adopted for that purpose, because back in the day, it was so important and so well respected that even alluding to it became a beautiful thing that can inspire countries to live in peace. So Panchashila, 5-fold discipline, 5 principles of discipline, 5 rules of discipline. But here, once again, discipline is not about being restrictive. It's about removing the unnecessary garbage from the flow of our behavior. Things that hurt, things that harm, things do not contribute to an improvement in the matrix of interdependence that we find ourselves in. So principle or training number 1, avoiding killing. Especially killing people, but of course, ideally also killing other sentient beings, including, if that's possible, for food purposes. So all the considerations about vegetarian diet, vegan diet, and so forth, they are included in the overall discussion of this principle. But the more obvious level of it is don't wage wars, don't kill people, and so forth. So then there's an expansion of it, and we think about all the different types of killing, but not just killing, because it also includes inflicting physical harm without killing someone, but just harming their body, damaging their body. And that's also ideally something we would avoid, because when we do commit that, even if we leave all the considerations of karma for now, and in a secular context, they're not discussed really, but just we consider the effect on our eudaimonic well-being. Well, if we go around and we kill people randomly, it's not going to be much eudaimonic well-being left. That's the working hypothesis there. And even if we see the effect on our mind of killing animals or even bugs, we see, hey, there might be a connection there. And also, when we flip that training and we say, protect lives, protect beings, catch that ant, release it outside, see how that makes your mind feel. Does it feel good to be compassionate, to be gentle, to be nonviolent? We can see some things about that already. Then avoiding taking what is not freely given, which in common parlance as avoiding stealing. And that's, of course, also an elaborate discussion there, because then it goes into the realms of taxes, copyright, and so forth. And those are important to slowly, gradually consider. There are more elaborate versions of these 5 trainings, for example, compiled by the great Vietnamese master Thich Nhat Hanh, and we're going to include that in the send-out, what we send out after this class to consider. You would see that Thich Nhat Hanh proposes a much more elaborate wording for each 5 of these trainings. But in the 4 Immeasurables book, they're essentialized in this way. Then avoiding lying, that is distorting facts, not saying things we don't know for sure to be true, and of course, not saying things that we definitely know aren't true. But beyond that, just working with it so that we can become more and more honest, but not honest in the way where we think we have to say everything that comes to our mind, and that's honesty. No. Is it true? But then is it kind, necessary, and is now the right time? So being honest does not mean we just say whatever comes to our mind and harm everyone. There's skillfulness in honesty. That, then unkind and unwise sexual behavior. And this is the wording that's been more and more used in the recent books by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, especially the ones that are edited by his honorable Western disciple, Venerable Thupten Chodron. And I think that's a very good wording, excellent wording, because it is a reminder that it's not about not having sexuality or sexual energy at all. It's about using that sexual energy in a way that is not violent to others. So the traditional understanding of that had to do with avoiding adultery, but then many of the countries where Buddhism was practiced and is practiced, they do in their culture contain polyamory of different sorts. Tibet famously not only had polygamy, it also had polyandry. So one woman might have been married to 2 brothers or several brothers and so forth. So it's not as simple as, very strictly speaking, monogamy as the Christian civilization sees it. It's not that. It's about establishing clear, honest relationships where people's feelings are not hurt through lying, deceit, and so forth, coming out of excessive desire or uncontrolled desire that completely forgets about honesty, respect, and so forth. But beyond that, of course, this also pertains to absolutely respecting not just consent, but radical consent in sexual contacts, where people have to give radical consent before being touched in any way and so forth. And that's, of course, a large discussion in the West as to how to teach people the ethics of consent, how to make sure everybody feels safe, especially how to make sure that female presenting individuals and female identifying individuals feel safe, because they have been historically the recipients of the majority of the sexual harm on this planet, not exclusively, but quite strongly. And then learning to work with that, and beyond that, the ethics of not spreading sexually transmitted diseases and the clarity around that and so forth, multiple considerations that have to do with human sexuality, thinking about those, exploring those, learning, being grateful to be able to learn about consent, for example. What a wonderful thing to be able to attend courses on these days, whereas before it didn't exist. So absolutely all that. And then avoiding intoxicants, for the simple reason that intoxicants can lead us to committing harmful behavior. And of course, all different intoxicating substances affect our minds in different ways. And from a certain point of view, even coffee or tea can be considered to be intoxicants, along with TV, books, magazines, YouTube, and so forth. Everything can intoxicate our mind. But starting with the basics and knowing that if we do tend to become somewhat violent or rude when we have taken a glass or 2 of wine, well, how do we practice nonviolence with that to make sure people are comfortable around us, and so forth. So all these considerations already, when we work with them, bring about that happiness called the happiness of clear conscience. It is a type of eudaimonic well-being. It is the happiness of knowing I do have an ethical practice. And actually, very interestingly here, in one of the very important texts of the Tibetan tradition, these days not studied very elaborately, but still quite important in the cultural tradition of it, the book of Kadam, Kadam Legbam, the miraculous scripture of Kadam, old Kadam school stemming from Atisha. It contains teachings from Atisha, or it is in a way a visionary account of the teachings of Atisha. But in that very important scripture, which is translated into English brilliantly by Lobsang Tenpa, and it's very rich, there's lots of stuff there, it's not an easy read at all, but within that, at some point, great master Atisha in a dialogue with his students says that there are 3 ways to die, and the best way to pass away for a spiritual practitioner is to pass away in a state where our mind is focused on the true nature of reality. So in a state of insight. That's quite advanced. That comes through doing a lot of insight practices supported by everything else. That's the best way to die, because truly seeing the nature of it all, pretty cool, pretty liberating, the best way to go. The second best way to go, says Atisha in his dialogue with his student, is to die in a state of one of the 4 immeasurables, which is exactly what we're exploring. To die truly in a state of loving kindness, or compassion, or empathetic joy or equanimity, but it's usually loving kindness or compassion. What a brilliant way to go. It's like our energy as we're passing away becomes liberated from this body and transforms into all-encompassing loving kindness that embraces the world. And then, of course, beyond that, our path is going to be very, very smooth and nice. But even in our dying moments, people would see, wow, even as they're passing away, they're full of loving kindness and compassion. How inspiring, how wonderful. So pretty cool. Of course, if we do master the practices that we're studying in this course, that will be available to us, which is one of the reasons for why I love facilitating these courses and showing the slides or reading these materials together. Because even if we don't really care about the death-related practices that are religious in nature, and they are present in Christianity and in all the great wisdom traditions of the world, even if not that, on a completely secular level, knowing how to allow our mind to be transformed into loving kindness and rest in that as we're passing away, what a powerful way to go. So we're mastering that even as we go through this course. But already, session 2, we have not yet given the definition of loving kindness. What's up with that? What if I die tomorrow, meaning me? And there's always a possibility of that. We had a relatively big earthquake 2 days ago, the other night. So even if it was bigger than that, it was less than 5 points, but it felt strongly. But if it was stronger than that, and of course, Nepal is notorious for strong earthquakes, if things started falling around me and I was to ask myself, well, I haven't yet learned about the 4 immeasurables, what do I do? Well, Atisha's 3rd option is quite nice. He says, focusing on our ethical behavior is the 3rd best way to go. Just knowing I've lived an ethical life. And that doesn't mean I've always been impeccable. That's not available to anyone. That doesn't happen. We're humans. We do cringy stuff, but we can fix most of it or some of it. And especially we can truly be dedicated to ethical practice. And this is where a moment of reflection. It would be good to, once again, do some journaling there. And this is not a thing I can do for you or instead of you in any way. I need to do my own on this question. And that is just asking myself orally or in actual journaling with pen and paper or a device and keyboard, what habitual actions that are harming others and disturbing the tranquility of my own mind can I recognize in my own behavior and therefore slowly work on? Even from this list, avoid killing, taking was not freely given, lying, unkind and unwise sexual behavior, avoiding intoxicants. And beyond that, the Buddhist tradition also gives us a list of 10 actions that harm others, such as, you would see them in the book, I think, such as using our speech to sow discord, or just idle chatter, where we're talking about nothing, not to establish deeper connection, heart-to-heart communication, that's valid, but just to fill the silence with random nonsense. And a lot of what we do online falls under that category. Or maybe truly harboring very malicious thoughts. That's also a thing that is not good at all. You know, very Orwellian oh, I hate them, spending 5 minutes a day doing that, but also having an immediate effect on our behavior and how we feel about the world. So truly contemplating that, truly considering that is a good start for this practice. And then what's the good end for this practice? Well, one outcome is that through working on this, we establish a genuine foundation, behavioral foundation for the four immeasurables and for the training in samadhi in general, the training in mental stability, gathering our mental energy and transforming it into this pure flowing water that is like a Tibetan river, rivers in Tibet in its former glory. And then beyond that, if we only master ethical practice, then passing away, well, also pretty cool to pass away knowing we've been an ethical person. We've done good. We've brought goodness to this world. And we've tried to not harm others. And the essentialized version of this ethical discipline is saying it's all about practice of nonviolence. And many people would know that the Dalai Lama very often teaches about the three types of nonviolence, and then he unpacks them to a greater degree in his book called Beyond Religion, which is one of the suggested readings for Beyond this course. Beyond Religion is for Beyond this course once we're done reading the four immeasurables together. And then when you go back to the very foundations of thinking, hey, what's once again, this ethical discipline thing that we talked about, in addition to Panchashila and so forth. Well, Beyond Religion is a very good exploration of that because he also explains the different mental states and factors, different functions of our mind that contribute to nonviolent behavior and to becoming true embodiment of nonviolence in this world. So slowly exploring these topics and establishing the foundation here. But for now, even with that, the first thing we could do is just consider these questions together and on our own, journal about them, and then start implementing that. And then in addition, and then next time we'll move into the next topic, which is the topic of the samadhi. For now, we will, I'll just reply to this comment here, and then we'll do the meditation. And first of all, yes, if you have any questions about Panchashila, you can ask them now, or next time, if you want more time in between now and then, and when we do our catching up thing, like we did today, you can absolutely ask any questions related to Panchashila. Before that, I would like to say that there's difference in just talking about Panchashila in our common secular terms and describing it in terms of the more technical lay precepts in the Buddhist tradition. There's a slight difference here because with Panchashila in general, as we've been talking about, it's just 5 aspirations in a way. I want to learn to avoid killing. I want to learn to avoid stealing and so forth. When we talk about the more specific form of that called the 5 lay precepts in Buddhism, and that would be part of a Buddhist course, then there are the considerations with how do I break that precept from a root? How do I avoid breaking that precept from a root? How do I receive these precepts? How do they live in my mind? What's the deal with that? And so forth. So they're more technical discussions that would work better in a Buddhist course. In our case, we're trying to describe it in a universal way. And from that point of view, Panchashila is 5 cool ideas about how to live our life. I'm sure Robert Thurman calls the 3 trainings 3 types of education. Well, this is an education that contains these 5 cool ways living our life. Not killing, pretty cool. Not stealing, pretty cool, and so forth. And it's true in that when people say that about us, they say, hey, he's a person that never lies, never steals, and never kills. The natural response for us is, what an awesome person. How many people on this planet do kill, do steal, do lie, do rape, or do harm others through their sexuality, and then do get intoxicated all the time in a way that really affects their ability to think clearly and act ethically. Wow, how wonderful to be balanced in that. Okay, so I'm just going to respond to these comments here, and then we're going to do our final meditation. So I'd invite the other questions that might be arising to be saved for our next catch up in our beginning of our next session, just to make sure we also have a few minutes for our final meditation now. So first to comment here, as I remember, Atisha said that if we're impeccable ethical way of life, this at least could help to reincarnate into a human world, which is very difficult to achieve. Absolutely true. From the Buddhist point of view, good ethical behavior could lead us to being reborn as human or to being reborn in the divine realms. So that's already pretty sweet, of course. It doesn't mean that that's the only thing a Buddhist would do to ensure that they gain such rebirth. There are extra practices, prayers, precepts, and so forth. And we also would want to die in a nice way, have a relatively peaceful, harmonious death, if possible at all. But beyond that, yes, that's the general logic, of course. Practicing nonviolence leads in a way to nonviolent results for ourselves from a Buddhist point of view and for the society. There's interdependence there. I really feel that the flora are also sentient beings, not just the fauna. Plants even respond to music. If one feels hesitant to destroy plants, what kind of diet can one have? Only nuts and fruits, perhaps? Well, that's a good exploration, an interesting exploration there. I would just very, very briefly comment on that from the point of view of the Tibetan tradition. So in the Tibetan tradition, the standard view, and you don't have to subscribe to that at all, I should say. There are multiple views in this world, of course. But in the Tibetan tradition, plants are considered beings, but not sentient beings, in that they themselves, each individual little bush, they do not contain consciousness in the same way that the human body becomes a support for consciousness. Within each plant, however, there might be many sentient beings, such as little bugs and smaller beings of other kinds and so forth. But beyond that, one interesting consideration there that is not often mentioned, but is certainly present in the tradition, is that all the plants that surround us, you walk out into a garden and there are multiple trees, especially if you live in California, you walk out in the majestic redwood tree and you see multiple incredible, beautiful trees. Well, in the Tibetan tradition itself, come straight from the mouth of the tradition itself, some very special plants, maybe like the majestic redwood trees, could be manifestation of highly realized beings, bodhisattvas. And one of the Buddhist sutras mentions that sometimes bodhisattvas do manifest as trees. Advanced beings on the path to awakening can manifest as trees for our sake. But beyond that, one other view that exists in the Tibetan tradition, you have to dig a little bit to find it, but it's also not that secret or anything, is that the entirety of this mandala that we find ourselves in, this environment, which includes the majestic streams of water, the beautiful rocks, the majestic Himalayan mountains right here outside my window and so forth, and of course the trees, the plants, the streams of water, all the 5 elements in their glory are seen as expressions of the natural energy of the Buddha of compassion. So all of it, not just each individual bush, but all of the natural world is, in some teachings, described as an expression of the Buddha of compassion, arising for our sake to hold us as this beautiful environment. So then from that point of view, you would think, well, plants respond to music. Some would say, well, my phone also responds to me tapping it. The screen lights up. So that's just a mechanism. Okay. We could stay at that level, but we could also think, instead of thinking that each individual plant is a sentient being on its own, we could say they're all part of this energy of aliveness that at the core of it is the Buddha of compassion. So that's another view that's offered by the Tibetan tradition. Instead of thinking in each individual bush, there's a little consciousness of its own, we would think they are all part of this alive energy that manifests from the Buddha of compassion to hold us and support us. And then from that point of view, we don't need to think that each bush is individually sentient. That being said, some people do believe that each plant is sentient. That's absolutely fine as well. As with regards to the diet, I don't have an easy solution for that. The view where you think each plant is a manifestation of the Buddha of compassion is a bit easier because yes, the Buddha of compassion manifests as the trees that give us beautiful fruits and vegetables and so forth. Okay, good enough. We'll work with that. That's better than killing animals from the point of view of the non-killing principle. But beyond that, of course, we always do what's available and what's wise in terms of common sense. But that's a creative exploration. Absolutely undertake it and think what works best. And final observation here, can you speak about number 4, specifically in the Indo-Tibetan tradition, sexual misconduct is not just adultery, but wrong time, place, masturbation, homosexuality, and other things. Can you speak to these other aspects of sexual misconduct that can be difficult, new for modern people to reconcile? Absolutely, yes. There's two ways of responding to that. There's not much time, but very, very short responses from my side. First of all, in an hour from now, I'm guiding a Pride Month themed meditation with the Tibet House, New York City, dedicated for raising money for endangered LGBTQ youth from across the United States. It's the called Trevor Project, very famous organization there. And I'm doing that with a very, very happy mind and clear consciousness, a clear conscience. Why? Because in the way that I've been trained in the Tibetan tradition, the main emphasis with regards to this fourth precept have always been on not harming others through our sexuality, primarily in terms of consent, so not raping, and adultery, yes, so establishing clarity in relationships, even if they are non-monogamous. And then beyond that, not spreading sexual disease. That's the oral commentary that I've received on these practices, and something that you would also find in a book edited and co-written by His Holiness co-created by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Venerable Thupten Chodron, book called Foundations of Buddhist Practice. There's a huge section on karma there, and within that, there's a section on modern ethical concerns. It talks about things like cloning and so forth, and birth control and beyond that. But one of the things mentioned there is this general topic, and it's described in the way that I've just mentioned. It's primarily about these 3 points of not raping, establishing clarity and honesty, so adultery, and then this last bit about not spreading sexual disease. Beyond that, Buddhist sexual ethics have been historically contextual. And there's a long essay brilliantly written by Alex Berzin that we're going to include in the links that you can read, and you would see how contextually Buddhist ethics around sexuality have evolved in different countries and different societies and so forth. So something that was contextually true 2,500 years ago is not necessarily contextually true now, but the basics of do not rape are pretty much still the same. And beyond that, there's a brilliant quote from Garchen Rinpoche on the issue of homosexuality that I very much like to quote and send out universally. Garchen Rinpoche is, of course, Lama Flamalan's own gurus, one of the greatest yogis of this world. I've mentioned him as a practitioner who spent many years in concentration camp. It's very simple, very elegant, and we're going to send that out. And I think that removes a lot of the questions around these issues and bringing us back to the essence of things, very closely connected to the four immeasurables. That's going to be included in the send out. That unfortunately means that we're at the end of our time, and I'm hesitant to prolong the class and spend more time instead of going to the concluding part. So we're just going to go straight to the conclusion. These are the things that we'll explore next time. But for now, the home play is to apply the principles of Panchashila and explore that. So we'll include the journaling questions once again, and to listen to the next guided meditation, which is on mindfulness of breathing. An explanation of that meditation is contained in chapters 2 and 3 of the book. We'll work with that a little bit more next time. But what we begin with in terms of the practice is to slowly move from vision quest and settling body, speech, and mind to a new set of recordings on mindfulness of breathing. Experimenting with that, and if any questions arise, we can explore them together. Absolutely, love is love. That's very true, and that is the essence of what Garchen Rinpoche says in that quote. Another quote very famous from Garchen Rinpoche, that is the essence of this course, and why four immeasurables are so beautiful and important to me personally. I have a very passionate connection with this topic, is that Dharma is love. Doesn't matter if one calls oneself a Buddhist. Dharma is love, in that practicing love, not just love as a romantic feeling, or love as a companionship between two people, but truly going into the depths of love and all the different forms of love hidden in our basic goodness. That's the essence of Dharma. And within that, people create a meanthable companionship. Wow, how wonderful it is to find someone who is a good companion for you in this world. That's all there is. At least that's what Garchen Rinpoche says, straight from the mouth of one of the greatest yogis of this tradition alive today. So that's a wonderful note to conclude on. Let our love spread, expand, be strengthened in our mind and in the minds of others. And let's hope that as we go along, more and more people would become embodiments of this love and all the four immeasurables. So my deepest gratitude to all of you, hoping to see you all in 1 week. We'll be sending out the materials shortly and seeing each other soon. And also I will probably be seeing some of you in the Pride Month meditation in 60 minutes. So see you there then, and enjoy your day. Bye.